It's Bonita from Pennies to Dollars, and welcome back to my channel. If you've been following me, I would like to give a shout out to Sensible Living by Money Mom. She has sent a lot of people over to my channel, and I'm excited to have you here. So today I would like to talk about food freshness and dates and spoilage, because we talk so much about trying to save money. But do you know that those dates on your food are primarily something that the public wanted back in the 1970s and they pushed for? Because before that date, there was a coded date on cans of goods and things like that that we couldn't decipher, and only the producer knew what they meant. And so we pushed for those dates to be on our canned goods and our food that we buy. And because of that, there has become a misconception over the last 40 to 50 years of what those dates actually mean. And people read them like they are the end date to when you can consume that product. But most research and the FDA will tell you to follow your instincts. Smell the food, do a visual inspection. If you have stored your food properly from the time that you purchased that food, it should last beyond those dates in most every case. There are going to be a few exceptions where maybe your meat will spoil sooner. But again, use the visual inspection and the smell. And if you can't tell on that, even use a taste of that food and you will be able to tell if it is spoiled. Eggs will float to the top when you're boiling them if they're not any good. When you open them up, you can see because the yolk just falls apart and is runny. There are ways to visually tell if your food is past its prime. So today we're going to talk about that. There's a lot of food spoilage in the United States. In fact, about 20% of our food that is thrown away because it's consumer waste based on these dates that are on their food. I have an elderly friend, and her daughter comes into her kitchen every so often, goes through everything in her cabinets and throws away everything that's out of date. That's not unusual. There's a lot of people that live and die by those dates on their food. But I can show you things that I eat all the time that are fine. And I can tell you about things that I eat every day that are past their date and they taste absolutely perfect. So food spoilage really does go into the cost of your pantry. And when people stock up, they should rotate things, but they shouldn't always toss them based on that date. The Food and Drug Administration has pushed in 2021 for manufacturers to go to best by dates, but there's still so much confusion between use by and best by dates. And again, it should fall back on the consumer to visually inspect that food before you serve it to your family. There are a few things that I have found that spoil quicker than the date, or spoil as soon as that date is up. And a few of those things are like crackers. You have to be really careful about that. They will get a funky taste. Ketchup will get a very vinegar type of taste when it has gone bad. Cereal will get stale. There are a few things like that that I'm really cautious when the date is up, and I taste that first before I use it. But there's so many things that last beyond the date. And so I'm going to tell you some of the things that our family uses beyond the date, and use that information as you will. Like I've told you in past videos, my husband and I owned a grocery store for many, many years. And for those many years, we brought home everything that was past the use by or the sell by date. And that is what we ate primarily for many, many years. There are some things that we would toss when we get home, maybe the salad if it started to look a little slimy. But for the most part, most of the things lasted well beyond the date, and a lot of times the packaged salads did too. So here's my list. Number one is chips. Chips will last months beyond the date on the package. We have been shocked. We brought home chips when we closed our store, and at 3 to 4 months later, the chips were still fine. We've eaten them up to 6 months later, and they were still fine. They tasted just the same as they would have before that date was up. So don't be too quick to assume that those are going to go stale. Now, if you've opened them already, it's very possible they will go stale. If they've not been opened, then most of the time they last a very, very long time past the date. Anything that we see that is close to the date, we quickly freeze. Shredded cheese, half and half, green peppers and onions. In fact, the other day we went and did a bunch of grocery haul cheap purchases. We bought a whole bunch of green peppers really cheap, and I chopped them up and immediately froze them. And so anything you see like that that's starting to go bad in your fridge, just chop it up and freeze it, and then you will not have that go bad in your fridge. I have been eating snack pack pudding that is a year old. Little cups of fruit that are a year old, and they're still fine. Canned goods will last anywhere from 1 to 5 years past their date. There's been times I've used them longer than 5 years past their date. And like I said, if the can starts to get rusty or bulging, visually inspect everything and make sure that you use your senses when you open them up. Look for color, look for texture, and you can tell if something has gone bad. We have found that milk will last about a week beyond the date. And again, use your smell. Things that last so much longer than you would even think are things like sour cream, yogurt, cheese. They put dates on those things to keep things moving. If you don't believe me, I can tell you that every year we ran a store, the canned pumpkin would go out of date right before Thanksgiving. Every single year. Those things are marketing ploys to get you to purchase all new product right before the holiday. So be cautious of those dates and think about when they're expiring and what's coming up next. Spices can last for years and years and years. And so can vanilla, Worcestershire sauce, mustard, soy sauce. All these things can last well beyond their date. And even though spices may change color just a bit, they're still very, very usable. After all, they're dried. And so a dried product will even last longer than usually what is on the date. Rice, beans, powdered jello mixes and pudding mixes, any of those things that are dried will last well beyond the date as long as they didn't get wet or get moldy and were stored properly. In fact, the FDA will tell you that dried milk will last basically indefinitely, and that's their term, indefinitely. Dried milk is a wonderful staple to keep in your house to cook with, and if you run out of milk and you live in the country like I do, there's been times I've had to pull out my dried milk, measure it, make a cup of milk to go ahead and make that muffin mix or whatever that I was going to make because I ran out of milk. We always kept dried milk growing up. Did you know that even toothpaste has a date on it? How many of us really look at the toothpaste date? We don't look at that date. A lot of us probably didn't even know that date was on there. And the only reason I know is because I owned a grocery store. So be very cautious of these dates. They are on there to keep the product rotated and keep the product moving off of the shelves. Even Slim Fast, I have used up to a year past the date, and it didn't taste any different than it did before the date that it expired, technically. Another thing that will last well beyond the date are tortillas. As long as you store them properly, keep them sealed so they don't dry out, visually inspect them for any mold that might be starting. Tortillas, we have found, will last months beyond the date on the package. Only 20 states actually require dates on the food. The only thing that the FDA says you absolutely follow the date on is baby formula. Keep in mind that a lot of these things are manufacturer tactics, things that the public has asked for. But then there's a lot of people that follow these rules to the T. Our household does not. We don't waste food. We make sure that it is actually undeniably not good before we toss it out. And the manufacturers also want to not guarantee their food beyond these dates. If they guaranteed food indefinitely, that would open them up to all kinds of refunds indefinitely. So they put a small date on there of when they are willing to refund your money for that product. So I hope this has given you some insight into the manufacturer dates on your food, and maybe you will think twice again before you toss that product based solely on the date that is stamped on the food carton. I hope you have a great day, and thanks for watching.